My sister's new boyfriend leaned back, swirled a glass of vintage red that cost more than my monthly rent, and looked me dead in the eye. The table went silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like a held breath. Then he smiled, that perfect porcelain white smile, and asked, "So, Joanna, are you still between opportunities, or is unemployed the family term now?" The laughter didn't start immediately. It rippled. First, a snort from my father, then a titter from my mother. Finally, my sister, the bride-to-be, joined in. I sat there, the taste of dry chicken turning to ash in my mouth, realizing that in my family, image isn't just everything, it's the only thing. But as Evan kept talking, riding the high of his own cruelty, he said one specific sentence, a detail about his high-level analytics work that shouldn't have been possible. In his rush to bury me, he'd accidentally handed me the shovel. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I just watched him. I let him believe he'd won. Because while they were laughing at my empty bank account, I was starting to realize that Evan's entire life was built on a foundation of sand, and I was about to let the tide come in. Before I tell you how I dismantled his perfect life at the altar, I have to ask, what time is it for you right now? And where in the world are you watching this from? I'm curious to see how far a story about the quiet sister can actually go. The drive to my parents' house that Sunday had been a masterclass in self-suppression. You know that feeling? That tightness in your chest that starts the moment you turn onto the street where you grew up. The lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives. The mailboxes matched. It was a neighborhood of people pretending that nothing unpleasant ever happened behind closed doors. I parked my beat-up sedan behind Evan's pristine silver European import. It felt like a metaphor I wasn't ready to face. Inside, my mother was in showroom mode. She didn't hug me. She adjusted my collar. "You're cutting it close, Joanna," she whispered, her eyes scanning my face for flaws like she was inspecting a shipment of damaged goods. "Try to look presentable. Evan's family is very observant." My father didn't even look up from his mail. A nod, a grunt, the bare minimum of recognition. I was a ghost in a house I used to call home. Then they arrived. My sister Sarah walked in like she was trailing stardust, and Evan Carter followed. He didn't just walk into a room, he occupied it. He had this way of moving, shoulders back, chest out, as if he were auditioning for the role of successful son-in-law, and already knew he'd secured the lead. "Joanna, good to see you," Evan said, his voice booming with a fake warmth that made my skin crawl. He shook my hand, squeezing just a little too hard. A subtle power play. I'm sure he thought I was too simple to notice. At the table, the hierarchy was established before the water was even poured. My parents sat at the heads, Sarah and Evan took the power sides, and I was tucked away at the corner, the inconvenient footnote to their success story. The conversation was a performance. Evan spoke about his week, weaving tales of boardroom battles and strategic pivots. My mother laughed at his jokes before he even finished the punchline. My father leaned in, hanging on every word about Evan's private equity connections. "It's all about the data, really," Evan said, waving a fork for emphasis. "Most people don't have the stomach for the high-level analytical reviews I handle. It takes a certain pedigree." He glanced at me then. That was when he dropped the line about my unemployment. That was when the table erupted in that collective, mocking joy. Why do people find it so easy to bond over the humiliation of someone they supposedly love? I felt the heat crawling up my neck. I looked at Sarah. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was too busy basking in the reflected glow of her accomplished man. But then, Evan kept going. He was drunk on the attention. "In fact," he leaned forward, "just last Tuesday I was running a cross-divisional risk audit for the Singapore branch. 14 hours straight. But that's the price of being indispensable, right?" I froze. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I had worked as a junior contractor for that same firm 2 years ago. I knew their structure. They didn't have a Singapore branch, they had closed it during the 2023 restructuring. And more importantly, cross-divisional risk audits were handled exclusively by the London-based compliance team, not the analytics department Evan claimed to lead. It was a tiny crack, a microscopic fissure in his polished armor. I stayed silent. I let him talk. I let him describe the Singapore skyline he'd seen from his hotel window. I even smiled when he redirected the conversation to mock my lack of ambition again. Inside, however, my brain was already running the numbers. Loneliness makes dangerous choices feel reasonable, but betrayal? Betrayal makes them feel necessary. The rest of the dinner was a blur of, "When are you going to get your life together?" from my dad and, "You should really let Evan look at your resume" from my mother. They didn't realize they were asking a wolf to help a sheep. When I left that night, I didn't feel hurt. I felt focused. I sat in my car in the dark, watching the light from their dining room window. They looked so happy, so perfect. I wondered, if the truth is a bomb, does it matter who pulls the pin? The next morning, the Singapore lie replayed in my head like a skipping record. It was too specific to be a simple mistake. It felt like a practice script, the kind of lie you tell people you think are too stupid or too starstruck to check. I opened my laptop. I didn't start with anything illegal. I started with the basics: LinkedIn, corporate directories, public filings. On paper, Evan was a ghost. He had a profile, sure. It was filled with buzzwords: synergy, optimization, vertical integration. But there were no endorsements from actual supervisors, no congratulations on the promotion posts. I reached out to Alex Nguyen. Alex and I had worked together on a grueling 6-month contract for a tech firm. He was the kind of guy who lived in the deep web and could find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who manufactured the needle. "Hey, Alex," I messaged, "I need a favor. Can you check a name against the internal database of Global Analytics Group?" He responded 5 minutes later. "Sure, Joe. Who's the target?" "Evan Carter." While I waited, I kept digging on my own. I found something Evan hadn't scrubbed: a small, defunct blog from 5 years ago. It was a travel vlog. In one video, a younger, less polished Evan was bragging about a surefire investment in a crypto startup. The comments section was a graveyard of angry people asking where their money went. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Desire whispers louder than guilt, and it was clear what Evan desired: a lifestyle he couldn't afford and a family that would validate his delusions. Alex's message popped up an hour later. It was a PDF. "Joe, I don't know who this guy is to you, but he's not an executive. He's not even a full-time employee. He was a temp in the mailroom 3 years ago. He got let go for misrepresenting credentials." I stared at the screen. The air in my apartment felt thin. He wasn't just a liar. He was a predator who had found the perfect prey: my family's vanity. But there was more. Alex had found a shell company, Carter and Associates Consulting, registered to a virtual office in a strip mall. No employees, no website, just a bank account that had been receiving steady, 5-figure deposits from private investors. I did the math. The dates of the deposits aligned perfectly with when Evan started dating Sarah. He wasn't just lying to them, he was using them. I could have called Sarah right then. I could have called my parents, but I knew exactly how that would go. My mother would call me jealous. My father would tell me I was slandering a good man. They would close ranks around Evan because admitting he was a fraud meant admitting their judgment was flawed. No, I needed something undeniable. I needed a moment where the image they loved so much would be the very thing that destroyed them. The wedding invitation arrived 3 days later: gold foil, embossed lettering, "A Union of Excellence," it read. I RSVP'd attending within seconds. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a fever dream of discovery. Alex and I became a 2-person intelligence agency. We found the investors, mostly older colleagues of my father and friends of my mother. People Evan had met at cocktail parties and let in on his exclusive high-yield analytics fund. He was running a mini Ponzi scheme right under my father's nose. The tension was building in my gut like a coiled spring. Have you ever held a secret so big it felt like it was burning a hole through your skin? Every time the family group chat pinged with a photo of Sarah in her dress or Evan at his bachelor party, I felt a wave of nausea. But I stayed quiet. I waited. One night, Alex sent me the final piece of the puzzle, screenshots from a private investment forum. A user, EC Wealth, was promising 40% returns on a proprietary algorithm. The writing style was identical to Evan's LinkedIn speak. One of these guys is threatening a lawsuit, Joe, Alex warned. Evan's running out of time. He needs this wedding. He needs the family name to buy him more credibility. I realized then that this wasn't just about a dinner table insult. This was about my sister's entire future. If she married him, she wasn't just marrying a liar. She was marrying his debt, his crimes, and his eventual downfall. The day before the wedding, I went to a local print shop. I didn't print a save the date. I printed a dossier, bank records, employment termination letters, forum screenshots. I put them in a cream-colored folder. It looked like a gift. I spent that night staring at the folder. A part of me, the part that still wanted my mother to love me, whispered that I should just let it go. "Don't ruin the day," it said. "Don't be the crazy one again." But then I remembered the laughter. I remembered the way Evan looked at me when he called me unemployed. He didn't just want to be successful, he wanted to feel superior. And the only way he could do that was by keeping me under his boot. It was time to see how well he could swim when the boot was on the other foot. The wedding venue was a vineyard that looked like it belonged in a movie. The scent of lavender and expensive perfume hung heavy in the air. I arrived late, intentionally. I watched the ceremony from the back. It was beautiful, in a tragic sort of way. Sarah looked like a princess. Evan looked like the man of her dreams. When the priest asked if anyone had any objections, the silence was deafening. I didn't say a word. I wasn't going to stop the wedding. I was going to wait for the reception. Why? Because the ceremony is for God. The reception is for the image. During the cocktail hour, I moved through the crowd like a shadow. I saw my father talking to a group of his business partners. Evan was there too, holding court. "Oh, it's a proprietary model," Evan was saying, his voice carry across the lawn. "Very limited entry. But for family friends, I can see what I can do." He was doing it. Right here. At his own wedding, he was closing deals. I waited until the speeches were over. My father gave a glowing tribute to Evan, calling him the son he never had. The room cheered. Sarah cried. Evan beamed, the king of the vineyard. The music started, a soft romantic ballad. People began to drift toward the buffet and the bar. This was it. I walked toward the head table. My heart was a drum in my ears, but my hands were steady. Sarah saw me first. She looked happy, truly happy. For a split second, I felt a pang of guilt, but then I looked at Evan. He saw the folder in my hand, and for the first time, his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Joanna," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "not really the time for a heart-to-heart, is it?" "I'm not here for a talk, Evan," I said. I didn't whisper, but I didn't shout. I used my professional voice, the one they all thought I didn't have. I laid the folder on the table between them. "What is this?" Sarah asked, her hand hovering over the cream-colored paper. "A wedding gift," I said. "It's a detailed breakdown of your Singapore branch, your private equity firm, and exactly where the money from Dad's friends is actually going." Evan's face went from tan to gray in 3 seconds. "Sarah, don't. She's had a lot to drink. She's jealous." "I haven't touched a drop, Evan," I said. I turned to Sarah. Page 4 is his termination letter from the mailroom. Page 10 is the list of people currently filing claims against his shell company. Sarah opened the folder. The silence that followed was different from the one at the dinner table. This wasn't a held breath. This was a suffocation. My parents appeared, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Joanna, what are you doing?" my mother hissed, grabbing my arm. "Leave now." "Read the papers, Mom," I said, pulling my arm away. Sarah was shaking. She reached the screenshots of the forum posts. She looked at Evan. Evan, what is EC wealth? He tried. Give him credit for being a professional sociopath. He tried to pivot. It's a misunderstanding, baby. A legal strategy. I'll explain it later. Explain it now, my father said. He snatched the folder from Sarah's hands. I watched his eyes move across the page. I watched the realization sink in, not that his daughter's husband was a fraud, but that his reputation was now tied to a sinking ship. Is this true? My father asked, his voice trembling with a rage I had only ever seen directed at me. Evan didn't answer. He couldn't. The high-level analyst had finally run out of variables to manipulate. The scene that followed was chaotic. There were no screams, just a low, frantic hum of accusations and panic. Evan tried to walk away, but my father's partners were already closing in, their faces red with the realization that their investments were gone. My mother turned to me. I expected a thank you. I expected a "you saved us." Instead, she looked at me with pure, unadulterated loathing. "Are you happy now?" she whispered. "You've ruined everything. The neighbors, the club, everyone is going to know." "They were going to know anyway, Mom," I said. "I just chose when." I didn't stay for the fallout. I didn't wait to see if Sarah would leave him or if my father would call the police. I had done the one thing I was always told not to do. I had broken the image. I walked out of the vineyard, past the rows of parked luxury cars, and got into my beat-up sedan. The air outside was cold and clean. I sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt light. I had spent 26 years trying to fit into a frame that was too small for me. I had spent my life being the unemployed disappointment while a predator was treated like a prince. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw my father in the rearview mirror, standing on the porch of the winery, looking old and small. I didn't look back again. Sometimes walking away isn't about leaving people behind. It's about leaving behind the version of yourself they tried to force you to be. If you've ever been the one who saw the truth while everyone else was blinded by the sparkle, thank you for listening. Tell me in the comments, what do you think is harder? Speaking a truth that ruins a perfect day, or finally walking away from the people who never wanted to hear it anyway? Don't forget to like and subscribe if you think the truth is worth more than the image. I'll see you in the next story.